The video you are about to watch was created with the help of artificial intelligence and aims to represent real scenes.
In April of 1912, the largest and most luxurious ship ever built crossed the Atlantic like a floating palace. Brightly lit halls, refined dinners, and comfort never seen before gave passengers a sense of total security. But while luxury distracted the eyes, silent decisions and deep inequalities traveled aboard the Titanic. Within just a few hours, this symbol of progress would reveal what excess tried to hide. Before we explore the curiosities that were on board that night, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling us what surprises you most about the Titanic as we follow this journey to the moment when everything began to go wrong. In 1912, the Titanic was presented as the peak of naval engineering, 882 feet long, 3 massive propellers, and enough power to keep her at full speed for days. On board, comfort was part of the design, with heating systems, elevators, and social areas created to impress. In first class, the interior architecture mirrored luxury hotels with fine woods and handcrafted details. Technology itself became a symbol of status, like the wireless telegraph operating almost non-stop. This mix of scale, innovation, and prestige convinced many that the ship was practically unsinkable, and it was exactly this confidence that shaped the voyage from the very beginning. In first class, every detail was designed to recreate the experience of Europe's most luxurious hotels. Dinners followed long menus, with multiple courses served on fine china and silver cutlery. Passengers wore tailored outfits suited for every moment of the day, from deck walks to formal evenings. Stewards and attendants answered requests quickly and discreetly, keeping life comfortable even in the middle of the ocean. For many on board, the ship was more than transportation. It was a social stage, where status and appearance mattered just as much as the final destination. The most expensive suites offered a level of comfort rare even on land. Some included private living rooms, separate bedrooms, and exclusive bathrooms, unusual features for ocean travel at the time. Heating systems kept interiors warm in the North Atlantic, while spaces like the heated pool, gym, and Turkish baths reinforced the image of modernity. These areas were not just functional, they were clear symbols of status. For many passengers, crossing the ocean meant continuing the same luxury routine without giving up comfort, privacy, or social prestige. Second class offered a comfortable yet more restrained experience, reflecting a balance between cost and prestige. Passengers had organized cabins, well-kept common areas, and regular meals served with discipline. Many looked at the ship with admiration, aware they were part of something extraordinary. For families and solo travelers, the journey represented stability and the hope of new beginnings. Even without the excess of first class, the Titanic still symbolized safety, progress, and confidence in the future. In third class traveled thousands of immigrants, many leaving everything they knew behind. Spaces were tighter, with shared cabins and narrow corridors that held entire families. Daily life involved long walks through the ship, simple meals, and moments of improvised companionship. Despite the limitations, there was hope, fed by the promise of a new life on the other side of the ocean. For these passengers, the Titanic did not represent luxury. It represented opportunity, resilience, and the weight of a life-changing decision. The ship's internal organization reflected a rigid social division. Doors, corridors, and stairways defined who could move where. Health and immigration rules reinforced these separations, keeping classes apart even during the voyage. While some moved freely through wide, brightly lit spaces, others followed long, controlled paths. This structure was not just practical, it was social, designed to preserve clear hierarchies on board the Titanic. Beneath the elegant halls, the ship depended on relentless, exhausting labor. In the boiler rooms, teams worked in shifts, feeding coal into the furnaces to keep speed and electricity running. The heat was intense, the air was heavy, and the rhythm set by the machines allowed little rest. Every piston, valve, and gear had to perform flawlessly to sustain the crossing. This invisible effort was rarely noticed by passengers, but without it, the Titanic would not move a single mile across the Atlantic. The Titanic was built with technical features considered advanced for its time. Watertight compartments were designed to isolate flooded areas, creating the belief that the ship could stay afloat even after serious damage. High cruising speed required the burning of hundreds of tons of coal every day, keeping workers in constant motion. These systems fueled an excessive trust in technology. For many engineers and passengers, the combination of power, compartmentalization, and scale seemed enough to overcome any natural risk along the route. As night fell, the environment around the ship changed noticeably. The cold intensified quickly, while the sea remained unusually calm, with no waves breaking against the hull. This combination reduced natural visibility, making it harder to spot obstacles ahead. On the bridge, officers began receiving ice warnings from nearby ships. The messages were recorded and reviewed, but the voyage continued without major changes. For most passengers, the night felt peaceful, with no clear signs of the danger drawing closer. At that point in the journey, the crew fully trusted their calculations and experience. Even with ice warnings logged throughout the day, speed remained within the expected standard for the route. The logic was simple. The ship was big, modern, and considered safe enough to handle the unexpected. Decisions on the bridge reflected this mindset, common in navigation at the time. Many believed small risks were part of progress. If you had been on board, would you have thought those choices were reasonable? Leave a comment and share how you judge these decisions, knowing what was about to happen. As the night moved on, attention turned to the dark horizon ahead. Lookouts kept their eyes fixed forward, facing bitter cold and almost no visual reference points. The sea remained strangely calm, without breaking waves to reveal danger. Small ice chunks drifted nearby, hard to distinguish in the darkness. Limited visibility made every minute more critical, demanding constant focus. It was a silent setting, where any detail could mean the difference between a safe crossing and an irreversible mistake. Suddenly, a clear shape broke through the darkness ahead. The iceberg appeared with almost no warning, blending into the dark horizon and still sea. The alert was immediate, and commands on the bridge followed in rapid succession. Every second began to matter as the crew tried to respond to the unexpected obstacle. The maneuver demanded absolute precision, but the ship's size limited any sudden reaction. In that brief window of time, split-second decisions carried consequences that could no longer be undone. The contact with the iceberg came without a thunderous crash. Many passengers felt only a slight vibration, followed by a muffled sound traveling along the hull. The ice scraped the ship's side for several seconds, opening gaps below the waterline. On the upper decks, most people continued their routines, unaware of the seriousness of what had happened. The lack of a violent impact reinforced a false sense of safety. Yet in that quiet moment, the ship's fate was already sealed, even if almost no one on board realized it. Right after the impact, there was no immediate panic. Many passengers felt only a gentle tremor and carried on without concern. In the lounges, luxury remained untouched, with lights glowing, music playing, and service continuing as usual. Crew members began moving discreetly, observing and assessing possible irregularities. The absence of visible signs strengthened the impression that nothing serious had occurred, but below the waterline, a silent danger was already advancing, unnoticed by most. On the lowest levels of the ship, the situation began to reveal itself clearly. Water slowly spread through the damaged compartments, slipping past barriers and rising minute by minute. Engineers and crew saw that the containment system could no longer isolate all affected areas. The sequence of flooded compartments showed that the damage was greater than expected. For the first time since the collision, there was a technical understanding that the ship could not remain afloat much longer. Still, this reality was known only to a few, far from the majority. After the damage was confirmed, the crew began rapid containment efforts. Watertight doors were checked and some compartments were sealed in hopes of slowing the flood. Engineers compared levels, calculations, and reports, evaluating the true impact of the collision. Gradually, the technical conclusion became unavoidable. The ship was compromised beyond what the systems could handle. Officers began sharing this information carefully, first among the crew. The truth was not yet public, but it was already moving through the ship, quietly reshaping decisions in the hours ahead. Once it became clear the ship was in danger, lifeboat preparations began cautiously. Many passengers were not given clear explanations of the situation's gravity, leading to confusion and hesitation. Instructions varied depending on where people were on the ship, reflecting unequal access to information. Women and children were prioritized, while others waited without understanding what was happening. Class divisions made the process even more unequal. As lifeboats were readied, it became obvious that not everyone would have the same chance to leave. As time passed, the first physical signs of trouble appeared on the upper decks. The tilt was still slight, almost unnoticeable, but enough to shift objects and alter balance. Glasses slid, doors no longer aligned perfectly, and some systems were shut down as a precaution. Lighting changed in certain areas and the carefully designed comfort began to fail. These small details broke the illusion of normality. Luxury was still visible, but no longer worked the way it once had, revealing that something essential was slipping out of control. As evacuation moved forward, class differences became impossible to ignore. First-class passengers were informed earlier and guided more quickly to the boats. In lower areas, many still waited for clear instructions, facing long corridors, gates, and controlled access points. Poor communication caused delays and uncertainty, especially among third-class families. While some were already reaching the upper decks, others were still trying to figure out where to go. The ship's social structure, present from the start of the journey, now directly shaped who had the best chance to survive. As water advanced, the ship's tilt became visibly steeper. In areas once reserved for comfort and elegance, the environment changed rapidly. Carpets soaked through, doors stopped closing properly, and water flowed down ornate staircases. The contrast between preserved luxury and the invading ocean created a powerful image. Spaces designed to convey safety and prestige now revealed just how fragile the situation had become. What once symbolized exclusivity was now being claimed by a force no one could stop. As time ran out, the last lifeboats were prepared in haste. Not everyone reached the upper decks in time, and many remained waiting for instructions that would never come. Limited space forced painful decisions, leaving entire groups behind. In some parts of the ship, music still echoed, trying to keep calm as the situation became irreversible. The difference between those who left and those who stayed was clear and final. In that last moment, the voyage turned into a farewell for many still on board. With the unstoppable advance of water, the ship's structure began to react visibly. The hull, under uneven forces, emitted constant metallic sounds from growing tension. Lights failed one by one, plunging entire sections into darkness. The sound of rushing water took over, replacing any sense of order. Every step required effort. Every movement revealed instability. By then, collapse was no longer a technical possibility. It was the inevitable result of everything that had already been lost. Under extreme pressure, the ship's structure finally gave way. A deep sound ran through the hull as the Titanic split into two distinct sections. Passengers were thrown into the freezing sea, surrounded by debris and darkness. Water filled every space, drowning out cries and metal groans. What remained of the ship sank quickly, taking hundreds of people still on board with it. In that final moment, there were no hierarchies or commands, only the absolute chaos of a tragedy fulfilled. After the ship disappeared, silence took over the ocean. The metallic noise and chaos gave way to nothing but wind and freezing water. In the lifeboats, survivors sat still, staring at the spot where the Titanic had stood minutes earlier. Darkness hid the wreckage, but not the weight of what had happened. The cold and the quiet made every second heavier. Surrounded by the North Atlantic, it became clear the ship was gone, leaving only people, lifeboats, and the night. With the arrival of dawn, the scale of the tragedy became visible. The calm ocean revealed debris scattered for miles, marking the place where the ship had vanished hours earlier. Among broken planks and fragments of the hull, luxury items floated silently, torn from their original meaning. Suitcases, chairs, and personal belongings now drifted beside ice and cold water. What once symbolized the status and comfort became an ironic reminder of human fragility. In daylight, the contrast between luxury and destruction stood undeniable. Decades after the sinking, the Titanic rests in silence on the floor of the North Atlantic. Darkness and pressure have preserved halls, staircases, and personal objects like time capsules. The luxury that once symbolized progress and confidence remains, now surrounded by rust and stillness. Every detail reveals choices made before and during the tragedy, from technical decisions to deeply rooted social inequalities. The disaster was not just the result of physical impact, but of excess, blind faith in technology, and human error. On the ocean floor, the Titanic continues to stand as a witness to how those choices shaped one of the most defining moments in modern history.